That's true. Eventually, the Neo Geo came along.
That was then shit got real.
Wait, so did anyone actually own a Neo Geo home console?
Back in the day?
Back in the day.
You, sir, what was wrong with you? Oh,
And
says he used
someone
to
else
live 3
raised
blocks
their
away
arms.
from
Were you
SMK
independently wealthy as a child? Can you say that louder?
You can go to the mic, actually. Yeah.
Maybe. Does the mic work?
I don't know.
We'll find out.
Okay, it works. I got a nod.
I just had a little bit of a disposable income at the time.
Just a little bit.
A little bit of
just a few
disposable income
thousand
at
to
the
spend
time.
on a couple
touch,
games.
yeah. A few
I believe
extra
the Neo Geo
$1,000
and
in the
launched the
pocket.
MVS retailed for $650, $649. Is that right? And
That wasn't with a controller, right? That was the base
no
system.
plugs, no controller.
Right,
Have you guys
you
seen
wanna
the
plug it in?
cartridges? They're like encyclopedia volumes that you
They come in these nice big thick plastic cases.
yeah.
But of course, that was the whole selling point of the Neo
it's
Geo.
true.
What, that the cartridges were really big?
Yes, that you could kill a man with a cartridge and take his money, and
use
then
it
you
to
could
buy your next game.
subsidize
Right,
your
yeah.
Neo Geo habit.
Well, it was big,
It was
expensive
kind of a
like hi-fi. Like, you are on the cutting edge of technology. And
Right.
And back then, cutting edge was not like sleek and small like it is now. It's like, it's a piece of furniture.
It was the 80s. It was conspicuous consumption. But yeah, the Neo Geo was literally an arcade experience at home. The MVS that plugged into your television was the same as the AES, or did I get that backward? Whatever. That was the arcade unit. They ran the same games basically, although there was like some kind of mod you had to do to get them to work interchangeably between systems.
Yeah, a home system won't run arcade cartridges unless you have a converter.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's, vice versa.
Yeah, and basically the only difference is like the coin drop mechanism, I think, for most games.
Yeah. So you would play a game in the arcade, and then you could go home and you could play that exact game at your home on your television.
But if I spent like $1,000 to play Metal Slug at home, why would I go play it in the arcade?
Well, because Frank, the Neo Geo also offered an innovation called memory cards, which you might be familiar with the PlayStation or other systems of the modern era. But the memory cards allowed you to plug in the memory to your home console, play a game, save your data. Like if you played Baseball Stars and progress through the season. Right on.
Yeah.
You could take your team data and take that into the arcade, and I guess like show off how awesome you were with Baseball Stars to everyone in the arcade. Like, suck on that putt,
And I bet they'd all crowd around and be like, "Oh, wow."
You get so many
Team has
girls doing
incredible
that.
stats. Yeah. Walk out with a
many.
girl on each arm.
Yeah, it still happens.
Baseball Stars.
Still.
The
Something
Neo
about
Geo,
that game.
when they were doing the home stuff, they really brought out like the big boy gloves when it came to advertising. Like, you remember the advertisement with the hot dog?
I do.
If you're not eating the Neo Geo's hot dog, what is it?
You're just a weenie or something like that.
It was like a picture of a hot dog, and
It had a lot of graphs showing how many more bits it had.
Yeah. I remember a bulldog being very
and
prominent.
it was
muscular,
squirrel.
just
The
like,
competition was squirrel burgers. No, it was like it wasn't a picture of does anybody know? It was a picture of a hot dog, and then it was a picture of like a Chicago style hot dog with the pickles on it and shit. And it was like,
anyway,
this is our system. It's better because it has more shit.
Stop talking about wieners.
There was this one really
That's all I think about.
slightly racy ad, which I never saw actually ran anywhere. It was this one guy and his wife. She's dressed in lingerie, and he's busy ignoring her, play something really stupid like this one contra code called Cyberlip. And it was just very awkward.
I love that name. I don't want to kiss that.
No.
Not at all. But Neo Geo.
yeah. I think the Neo Geo was kind of to Genesis as TurboGrafx 16 had been to NES. It ran on the same basic technology, except it was amped way up. It was the same 68,000 processor that you saw in the Genesis and the Macintosh. It ran at like twice the speed of the Genesis's. It had way more RAM. Well, no, it had about the same amount of RAM, but much more video RAM. And it had, I don't know, like the hardware was really crazy and had kind of some weird quirks to it. But it was still a viable system all the way up until like the beginning of last decade. They were still making games for it.
Yeah,
and they still looked really, really good. Stuff like what were some of the later games, like The Last Blade 2?
Last Blade, Megara, Mark of the Wolves.
Yeah, Mark of the Wolves, yeah.
Metal Slug, all the way up to 5. Yeah,
The later Metal Slug games, like that was running on a system that came out at the same time as the Genesis, but
They were making games up until 2004.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like you'd get like Dreamcast ports of the Neo Geo games, and like they're not as good as the games that were made for a system that was like a decade older than.
Yeah, I mean the Sega Saturn was, by all accounts, a 2D powerhouse, but it still had some trouble with running certain SNK games that had Neo Geo origins. It's pretty impressive. But it was also really, really expensive.
Yeah, no one had it.
So only 2 people in here could even afford one.
So that's why they came out with the Neo Geo CD, which was basically the same system but cheaper, and no one bought that either.
Nope. Yeah, by that point it wasn't the price, I don't think.
Well, at that point it's like, do you like fighting games?
That aren't Street Fighter 2? Well,
if not, then you should get something else. You wiener.
The Neo Geo CD is kind of weird because the big selling point of the Neo Geo games, which is that they had huge memory capacity, no limits, everything. Everything could be huge. That actually worked against the CD player because it had a single speed loading time. So
that's what I have.
Those huge game ROMs took forever to load into your system.
They had to load in the entire thing all at once because there was no. They just took the ROM and dumped it on the CD and then loaded it in as if it were a cartridge. So basically, you put the game in and you had to watch this loading animation of a monkey juggling a ball or something like that for like a week, and then you get to play like Fatal Fury 2.
Yeah, I think the first time that someone spent a minute and a half loading a Fatal Fury level or fight, and then finished the fight in 30 seconds and had to load the next one for a minute and 30 seconds. I think that kind of took the bloom off the rose, as they say.
They really should have done it on like laser discs to keep with the theme.
Maybe they could have teamed up with Don Bluth, and gotten him to illustrate Metal Slug.
No.
But
Neo Geo was an interesting thing.
We mentioned the Turbo CD and the Neo Geo CD. Should we mention the Sega CD, or is it
Snatcher?
But that was actually a PC 8801 game.
But it was better on the Sega CD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think of it as a Sega CD game despite its origins. I think they really went all out for the Sega CD version, which is awesome, as people in this room can attest to. But Sega CD... prize fight.
For my money, the game that kind of like defined the Sega CD and really made it worthwhile came at the very end, which was Lunar 2, and it was pretty much a traditional RPG in the Japanese style. Not really that much different from the original Lunar, but
except for the fact that like Working Designs broke the American version. You had to spend MP to
people
save.
bitch about that, but I did not have any trouble with that game.
I didn't definitely. I played it on the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the animation that they put into that game, I think cutscenes are kind of past their sell-by date at this point. But back in 1995, the animated cutscenes that showed up throughout the game, those were absolutely phenomenal. They were beautiful, and they told a really interesting story, and they told it well. And they really made the game, I don't know, I recently had kind of an online discussion about which game had the most amazing intro of that era, and people were saying Chrono Trigger was so awesome, but if you hold up the intro to Chrono Trigger, which I love, next to the intro to Lunar 2, there's just no comparison. Lunar 2 is this cinematic, it's interesting, it's beautifully drawn, and has really great music, and really just kind of pulls you in and makes you want to know what the game is about.
ActRaiser has the best intro ever.
Where isn't that just like a spinning logo?
Fuck yes, it's a spinning logo. Spun the shit out of that logo.
The Sega CD is also notable for being the only system to have a game with hip-hop duo Crisscross as a star.
Also, Marky Mark, I think.
Marky Mark.
Actually, let me tell you about my iPhone game in development that's going to change that.
Oh, yeah? Crisscross is back. Yep. Can you make their video
this time
again?
In pod form.
This time, you make them jump. Fuck! Could have made $1 million. Gave that shit away.
That was a pretty good joke, Chris Kohler. I like that one.
One of the reasons I love the Sega CD was it was in that CD-ROM era where all the big PC games were coming out, but my family couldn't afford like a $2,000 computer. But they ported a lot of those games to the Sega CD, and a lot of them they were kind of bad ports, but that's how they got me into it. They had Monkey Island, Dune, Wing Commander, Rise of the Dragon, and some of those they even added stuff with that you weren't ever put in the back of the original PC version, which still makes them kind of relevant. Like Rise of the Dragon is kind of an iffy adventure game by a Sierra subsidiary, but it has really, really good voice acting.
And has a character named The Jake, which I always like.
The Jake.
I think more people need articles in their names. So we're kind of past the halfway point here, and we haven't even touched on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I kind of want to rock through this so we can get questions.
So we can get the questions. I tried to
live.
segue into it a little bit, but I was serious about the ActRaiser intro. That was the moment for me that like blew me away technologically with 16-bit. Like all those things happening at once. Like, you know, I played Mario World and loved it and everything, but like putting an ActRaiser in the Super Nintendo for the first time with the not only them doing that chintzy Mode 7 thing with the logo spinning up to the front, but like the incredible use of the sound hardware, the really, really great sound programming, and that dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, let's hear it for the Super Nintendo.
I can still listen to that music. I can listen to that and to Secret of Mana's soundtrack right off this.
So
right
Chris
off
Kohler,
the OST, and I can still listen to that to this day. It's still beautiful
Chris
stuff.
Kohler, what you're saying is that the best thing about Nintendo's Super NES was the Sony sound chip?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sony.